Okay, so this video is going to show you how to use our 5-step problem-solving strategy to find out the speed of an object. So at this point, you should have your notebook open to the Cornell Notes you have set up and have your first section titled 5-Step Problem Solving. So what I'm going to show you now is the 5 steps that we'll be using all year. Every single unit will have some sort of calculation and equation that you're going to have to use. And we're going to be graded on using these 5 steps. So the lesson today is really introducing the 5 steps and practicing that with our speed equation. So you're going to write this down in your notes, our 5-step problem solving under that heading. Your first step you're going to copy down is that you're going to write down your knowns and unknowns. So you're going to be given word problems, and in those word problems you're going to be given numbers. And so your first step is to write down all the numbers you know, and then find out what the question is and write down your unknowns. The second step is to write down the equation that you need. Okay, in this case today you're just going to be using the speed equation, so you're just going to write down the equation. The next thing you're going to do is you are going to substitute. And this is that math term in your words of the day that you had today, is that you're going to substitute your knowns into your equation. Then once you have everything substituted, you're going to solve for your unknown, and then you're going to check to make sure your units are correct. So if you need to pause the video to write all this down, please do that, and then unpause it to get to the next slide. Okay. So we're still on our notebook page. We've written down all 5 steps. Now your next heading is going to be equation for speed and velocity. So copy this down under your heading equation for speed and velocity. Our equation is pretty simple. To find speed, we're going to take our distance and divide it by time. And we're going to use abbreviations for that. Speed is going to be S, distance is going to be D, and T is going to be time. And we call these variables. The letters are the variables. Okay, so now that you have written that down, I'm going to go through an example problem with you. And I want you to actually copy down the example problem, and then I'm going to show you how to solve it. So here's our problem. A car is going down Rice Street. It travels 120 meters in 15 seconds. What is the speed? And we're going to use these 5 strategies. Our first step, second step, third step, fourth step, fifth step. Don't copy it. You already have it copied earlier in your notes. I have this here just as a reminder as to what our steps are. Okay. So first thing I want to do is I usually just underline my numbers that I'm given. So I've got 120 meters and I've got 15 seconds. So those are my 2 knowns. So in my first step, I'm going to identify what are called our variables, or write your numbers down. So I've got 120 meters and I've got 15 seconds. Notice I'm abbreviating. I'm putting M for meters and S for seconds. And I'm going to put those equal to some sort of letter. I'm going to go down to my second step, which is to write my equation. Speed is equal to distance divided by time. So in my equation, I know that distance is meters, so I'm going to put it equal to D. And I know that of my S, my D, and my T, that my T is equal to 15 seconds. And my unknown, I'll put that as a question mark, is my speed. So now I've identified my variables, I've written my equation, and now I'm ready to substitute. So I know that instead of an S, it's my question mark. So I'm just going to leave that as an S. Instead of D, I'm going to come over here and write that that's equal to 120 meters. Notice I am keeping the label with the number. Okay, if you keep your label with your number, your units at the end for step number 5 will be super easy. And then I'm going to draw my line. Instead of T, I'm going to write 15 seconds. And just so you kind of can see where these things are coming from. Distance is getting written here, and the time is getting written here. This is my third step of substitute. All right, so now I'm going to solve it out. So I'm going to come over here and get my trusty calculator. Again, in science, we want you using the calculator. Okay, so this tells me I'm going to do 120 meters divided by 15 seconds. So I'm going to do 120 and I'm going to divide it by 15, and my calculator gives me the answer of 8. So that is my fourth step, solve. So I'm going to come over here and write 8. And now for my fifth step, checking for correct units. My units are right here. I've kept them together, so now I have them. So I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to write my units, meters per second. So this is how you're going to get graded on this. Step 1, you're going to get credit for doing your knowns and unknowns. Step 2, you're going to get credit for writing down your equation. Step 3, substitution. Step 4, solving it. And step 5, having your correct units. Every single math problem you do this year in science will need to have all of these steps done to get full credit. Okay, so now you've done your example problem, and your example has been written here. So now get a new heading, speed from a graph, and we are going to find out how we can find speed from a graph. So, as you learned from other lessons, the speed of a graph, the slope of the line, basically told you the speed. If it was a steep line, then it was faster than a flat line. So you don't need to write this example down, but I do want you writing this. The slope of the line is actually going to give us our speed. Okay, in math class you've been learning this as a rate, and speed is a rate. So we want to know the rate at which this bus is moving in this example down here. So as a reminder, slope is equal to change in y over the change in x. Well, our y is always our position, and our x is always time. So you're just going to find the change in x, or change in time, and find your change in position. So let's see how this is done in an example. Okay, you're going to get a graph that looks like this, and you're going to have to find the slope between points A and B, or find the slopes between B and C. Okay, I'm going to show you this example. Okay, so what I've got here is I need to find my change in y over my change in x. So I'm going to remember that now for this time, my equation is going to be speed. Let me get a different color pen here. There we go. Speed is now equal to the change in position divided by my change in time. So I've written my equation, step 2. 2 is checked off. I'm going to identify my variables. I'm going to go a little bit backwards here. Speed is going to be equal to my change in position. So position here started at 10 and it ended at 0. So I'm going to start with where I ended, 0 minus 10. And then I'm going to divide that by how much time that took. So my start time was, let's see, 4 seconds, or my end time was 4 seconds, and I started at 2. So I'm going to go 4 minus 2, which is my change in x. What I get is a negative 10 divided by 2. So now what I've done is I've written my equation, I've identified my variables, I substituted and solved. Now I just need to do my units. I notice over here on my graph that it's meters and seconds down here. So I'm going to do meters here, seconds here. I'm also going to make sure I have meters and seconds here. And now I'm going to solve. So speed is equal to negative 5. Because if I use my trusty calculator and I do negative 10 divided by 2, I get a negative 5. I could also use my calculator to do this math. I can do 0 minus 10 equals a negative 10, and 4 minus 2 equals 2. So trusty calculator coming in handy today. Next step I have to do is my units, which are going to be meters per second. Notice I keep track of everything. I can also check that my units are correct. Another thing I want to notice is that there's this negative slope. Notice our slope is negative over here. So you should expect a negative answer for this one. You should expect a negative answer for that one. Positive and a positive answer for those. Okay. So this concludes our notes. I want you to write a summary and write 2 to 3 questions and get that checked off to get credit for doing that. Once you're done with that, you're going to move on to practicing these problems in your notebook. And as you're practicing these, I want to make sure that you're getting them checked off. So do these first practice problems, check the key, then work the next section. Check the key, then work the next section. Okay? And then continue working on. If you get to these level 4 practice problems, there's a new video that you need to watch. Good luck, and make sure you're checking with your teachers to check your answers.